Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, and I'm going to be talking about The Haunting of Hill House, Season 1, Episode 7. It's called Eulogy. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, this, of course, I think it's very interesting to me how this season's been very tightly woven. And I think it kind of has to be almost because we're dealing with this mystery of what happened on this stay in the house when they were kids, right? And what happened on those final few days. And everything's kind of revolving around that. Everything in present day is revolving around Nell dying. Everything from the past is revolving around what happened on those final few days. And this episode was very much Hugh's episode. I was kind of expecting it last time, but we got it more so this time. And we get to see who he's talking to. He's seen Olivia as we kind of guessed, but he doesn't think she's real. He just thinks that this is him. This is in his head, kind of in a more traditional sense. To the point where she's actually kind of almost like conveying his inner thoughts. There's a great scene where he goes to talk to Stephen, and we hear her tell him that he should say, "Oh, I'm sorry for not communicating. I'm sorry that I never tried to reach out. I'm sorry that I didn't fix things. It's the biggest regret of my life." And then he doesn't say it. He just says, "Oh, have a nice flight," or whatever, So I think he's doing a really neat job of keeping everything revolving around the same couple of events. Because it's actually impressive to me that we're episode 7 now, and it still doesn't feel like I'm still not tired of the mystery of the house. It's still bubbling over just enough to make it really interesting. Especially since this episode, more than any of them, has advanced it quite a bit, because now we're actually starting to see the story of Olivia go crazy. We're starting to see her act differently, which is something we've not really seen up until this point. We saw her get a little bit upset with the kids in one episode, but other than that, she's still been kind of normal. It's only just this episode where we're seeing her act a little bit strange, and we hear the backstory from Mr. Dudley as to why they don't come to the house after dark. About how his wife was pregnant and she still worked a lot, she worked all the time, and after the kid was stillborn, which, I think right now is the prime candidate for Abigail as the unborn child, but I could be wrong, but I was thinking it as he was talking about it, but she baby stillborn, and she's back working a month later, and she thinks she hears a child in the night, and she gets all beat up because she searches all night for this child in the mansion, and he comes to hear it the next night, and he hears it, and this is actually what convinces them not to come to the house after dark anymore, because he's recommending to Hugh that Olivia maybe take some time away from the house, which Hugh, thinks he's stepping out of line saying this, and this is when he sees the new blueprints, because all of the blueprints for the house are a little bit off. None of them quite match and don't quite make sense. So she tries to create a master out of all the various blueprints to actually represent what the house actually is, but it's jibber jabbish. Gibberish. Gibberish is what I'm about to say. And then I kind of mixed it with Jabberjaw for some reason. I don't know. Jibber jabbish, puffalope. So he's confused by this. He doesn't understand the blueprints, and this is when Mr. Dudley goes into this speech. I like the filmmaking here a lot because it cuts between them at the start when he suggests that Olivia take some time away from the house, but when he finally starts to tell the story and explain why he said that, the camera stays on Mr. Dudley for a long time. It's not until even though Hugh's kind of interjecting with a sentence here or there, it never cuts back to him. We stay in the one shot, just slowly tracking into Mr. Dudley as he's telling this story. Very effective, really draws you in. And I think what I like about it as well is that Mr. Dudley's not been a big character. He's been someone who's been around, he's been in the odd scene with Hugh, talking about the house, but he's been a very minor side character, as has Mrs. Dudley. But all of a sudden, in this one scene, the actor's given a chance to just, perform. He just stands there and he performs, uninterrupted for like a solid 3 minutes of telling this story. And I thought it was very well done. It was very impressive. I thought they did a good job. So, this kind of plants the seed that the house affects people, especially if you're here after dark. And the episode's kind of bookended with the flashbacks because we have the aftermath of the final night where the police officer is interrogating Hugh. And what I thought was really neat about the first interrogation scene is that the officer's bringing him coffee, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get the right thing." And it kind of feels like he's playing a bit of a tactic, like, he's doing the good cop thing, where he's intentionally kind of setting things up to, like, "Oh, I'll be really nice and go get you your cream and sugar." But what I really liked is he makes a point of telling you that he can leave at any time, he's not under arrest, but it would probably look bad. And what I thought was really neat is this entire scene, when they're having this conversation about him having to stay here, and that he can leave, but he shouldn't because it would look bad, is that he leaves the door open, because he's still in the interrogation room, right? It's not like they're just in a more casual setting. They're still in the interrogation room, and the door's left open the entire time, but the police officer is standing between him and the door. So it's a visual representation of the fact that he can leave if he wants, but there's this obstacle in the way that says he shouldn't. So again, just really simple, really effective little stuff. But yeah, Hugh wakes up in the middle of the night, and Olivia's got a screwdriver to his throat, and she's in kind of it's like she's asleep still. It's almost like she's sleep, not walking, but acting something out, and she's got the screwdriver to his throat. And he wakes up, and he wakes her up, and he's like, "What the hell, Olivia?" And he actually convinced her. He shows all the plans that she made, which, and the shape that she drew all over the plans were the shape of their dream house that they're eventually going to build for themselves. And convinces her that she should take some time off and go to her sister's, to Janet, where the kids eventually go. And she agrees. She agrees that she's acting weird and that she could use a break. But of course, this all goes alongside the plot of, after the storm of last episode, there's water damage in several floors of the house, more than there should be. Like, it's already all the way down to the basement. And they're down there investigating with Mr. Dudley, and they get in an expert, and he can't afford to hire the expert, so he just hires the fans that they use to try and air things out. And he's trying his best, and that's where he gets his hand injury. He gets cut in the fan. Stephen, unplugs everything, and yet they're all plugged in again a second later. But they see, he takes a photograph, and we see like the shape of a face inside the hole in the wall, and then later on you see the shape of the whole person there. And eventually, when he thinks it's rats, he wants to kill the rats, he starts to pull down the bricks. And it's when he's doing this, there's actually, someone in the comments pointed out, a little bit early, might I add, it was kind of in advance, so it was a bit of a spoiler, but there is one of the hidden ghosts is behind him in this scene. There's like shelving in the back, there's like a trolley of shelves, and you can just see this head peeking up above the shelving in the background. Very creepy, but I was looking for it because someone spoiled it, but don't spoil things, it's bad, don't do it. But he finds this body, and it turns out this is Mr. Hill. This is Mr. Hill, who bricked himself inside the wall, and then probably had second thoughts because there were scratch marks, and the noise they were hearing all episode was the scratching, right? Even though, obviously, he never actually says that out loud or thinks about it, but he hears this scratching, that's why he thinks it's rats. So that's still happening, in ghostly form, if you will. But they find this body. It's an old cold case, and it's the police officer who's interrogating him who comes by and tells him, "Oh, you've solved this old cold case. Here's what was happening." And as he's leaving, he asks, "Is this place really haunted?" And Stephen just there, so Hugh just my kid's here thing. So I guess it is. And it's this kind of friendly interaction. It was neat. It was neat to have that officer come into a different scene outside of the two bookended scenes, I thought, just to give us a different side of him. Because he does seem like a fairly friendly guy, but he is obviously still doing his job, and he's trying to get to the bottom of what's happening here. But yeah, so really good stuff, and it bookends the whole thing with coming back to the interrogation much later in the interrogation, where Hugh has been very cryptic about some things, where he can't fill in this 3-hour gap from when he found his wife's body to when he phoned the police, and he's insisting that he didn't touch her, but he's also not outright saying that she committed suicide. And the officer can't make heads or tails of this. It's like, you're hiding something, and I don't even know what. Why are you refusing to admit that she committed suicide? But he says, okay, so Shirley said you woke her up, or she woke you up because she was surprised to see her mother. Because he thought she was gone. He thought Olivia had left for the sister, but she was still in the house. And you ran up to the red room, and we see this happening as they're talking about it. And Hugh says nothing happened. There's no that door's been locked the entire time. In fact, at one point in this episode, he thinks the moisture must be coming from the red room because it's the only room they can't check, and he tries to break into it. He's like, screw this. Honestly, if they couldn't find a key, I feel like you would have just broken down the door even earlier than this. Just thinking, well, you know what, we'll have to break it down and just put in a new door because because we can't get in. I felt like that would almost be something you would do quite early on, once you realise you couldn't get in there. But he gets really angry. He tries to break it down, and it just won't budge. He's trying his best, and it won't happen. But we see that when he does get up there, he says nothing, and the cop doesn't believe him. And then we see what he actually sees, that the door's lying open. And the episode ends at the perfect moment as he's like going into the open door. It's like, what's beyond the red door? So that's super exciting. It's a great cliffhanger for going forward into because I think it's really cool. As much as it's been jumping back and forth a little bit in the flashbacks, and the same with the present day stuff for the first 5 episodes. Although that's kind of straightened out to be more linear now, from episode 6 onwards, seemingly, is that there's still like a general kind of timeline moving forward in the flashbacks. There's the odd thing that jumps to the end of the flashbacks, there's the odd thing that jumps to the start of the flashbacks, but for the most part there's this forward story that's happening in it. Especially, again, the more we get further in it, the more linear it feels. And I think, again, that makes sense because it's like we're making more sense of the puzzle as we go forward. So that feels natural to me to do it that way. And of course, in present day, it's the funeral of Nell. It's everyone standing around awkward the morning of the funeral, going to the funeral, having the service, having the reception afterwards, and it's just full of all these awkward moments. And it's mostly revolving around Hugh trying to interact with his various kids to varying success. Does quite well with Theo, surprisingly. Yeah, Shirley kicks him out of the main house because he's too early. After still being clearly mad at her husband, Hugh thinks it's about the money, but it's not, and he realizes that when he's talking to Theo. Actually, no, he doesn't. He realizes that when he's. Is it when he's talking to Theo? Maybe he's talking to Shirley. But either way, he realizes it at some point that it's not just about the money that he took from Stephen, but Theo actually kind of connects with them, and basically shows, gives an olive branch and sees a sign of understanding. An understanding because now she's messed up. She understands to some extent, how hard it's been for him to try and sort of reconnect with these kids, and how she could have made more of an effort. So he does surprisingly well, and it's really nice how when she leaves the room and she says, "No, you don't have to leave. Just enjoy your coffee. I'm going to go shower." Olivia's like sitting there where she was, says, "Hey, that went well." Some go better than others. He's having a really bad time with Shirley, and I really like how Shirley doesn't want to ride with her husband, and she doesn't want to ride with his siblings because Theo was there and she's mad at her. And it gets to, it's like, she's stranded with Hugh. Hugh's the one guy left with a car. It's like, okay, do you need a lift? So she's forced to ride with him, and he tries to talk to her. He tries to connect with her, but it's kind of a running thing through the episode that she's very stubborn and she needs her alone time. And he kind of jokes with Olivia's ghost, if for lack of a better phrase, about how she gets that from her, and how Shirley's always been someone who needs her own space. So no, I like that. I like his moment with Luke, where Luke's like, "Hey, do you even know about Theo being gay? Like, do we have to talk about this?" And he kind of like, "Oh, I already knew. Like, your mother guessed it when she was like 8. Like." And he kind of, they have a little bond there. They have a little sort of moment where he kind of laughs at that. He's like, "Oh, really? You always knew?" And that's nice. But of course, the big horror stuff of the episode in the present day is at the funeral. Luke gives a great little speech at the service, but at the funeral, he sees Nell standing there, all bent necked, and whatnot. And then he sees his mother coming from the casket to pull him under. And Stephen's the one who comes up and grabs him and says, "Snap out of it, you didn't see anything. That's mental illness runs in our family. It's in our genes. We have to keep hold of this. We have to be vigilant." And grills him for it and tries to get him to snap out. He doesn't want to bury him like this because this is what it's going to lead to if you keep going down this path. And obviously Hugh tries to talk to him about it later, but this, arguably is what puts him in a really bad place for later on. Now, I can see there being a swerve here, and again, it not being exactly what we think, But it's after he's talking to Luke again later on in the episode where he looks down and notices that Luke was by Shirley's purse. And then, later on, of course, Shirley can't find her credit cards or her money. And then Theo comes in complaining that her car's not there. And then this entire time, eventually Stephen says, has anyone seen Luke? And they realise what's probably happened. The entire time, Olivia, Ghost Olivia in Hugh's head's like, hey, you saw him and it didn't look right. You know it didn't look right, but you didn't want to see it. You didn't want to think it. And he kind of has to eventually say something here. And it's this idea that he's been reluctant to actually step in and say what's really happened all these years. It's still a lingering effect that he seems to have this problem with, where he can't admit the awful things, so he has to kind of dance around them. He has a problem with this, in a grander scale, of course, with what happened at the house, but then in a smaller scale, where it's kind of almost dominoed into other parts of his life and how he deals with his children, and how it seems like, Aunt Janet raised them, and he didn't make as much of an effort to be a part of their lives, at least for a long time afterwards. Perhaps because of the experience, but perhaps because he didn't feel fit to. I'm sure that's something we'll maybe delve into a little bit more in the last few episodes, but so there's a real sadness to a lot of this, as there was last episode, and as there should be. It's a funeral episode after all. But there's a real sadness here where he's trying to reconnect to his kids, and he's having little bits of success here or there. But even when he does, there is this awkwardness to it. There's this kind of, we're in this situation because we have to be, and it's an awful situation to be in, and he's trying to connect. And some of the kids are, lashing out against them and kind of pushing them back. Also worth mentioning, Theo's girlfriend shows up, and Theo's pissed about it at first, but kind of realizes she's been a bit of a dick and kind of softens a little bit over the course of the episode. But obviously we have to talk about the ending. We have to talk about the spooky ending, where after they've realized about Luke, Stephen goes to look for him, and Theo and Hugh are left alone, and they notice this trail of dirt, as if something, perhaps something that's risen from the grave has walked in. But they notice this trail of dirt, and they follow it through to Shirley's office, and her model home that she's very proud of has been smashed to pieces. And Theo's like, oh man, she's going to kill someone for this. This is, in the past 24 hours, she's been humiliated because her husband's been taking money that she outright refused, and was on her high horse about not taking her. Then she caught her husband with her sister in a precarious position, and now our model home has been smashed. She's not having a good 24 hours. It's safe to say that. But we have our outright ghost scene here. We have an outright scene of Olivia with the face all damaged, like we saw before. Like she saw, like Theo saw as a kid. It was her that saw this when she touched her mother's hand, and she saw that the side of the head all damaged. But of course she's all sort of decomposed and cold looking, and she crawls. We get the hand coming around the desk. It's sort of classic horror movie stuff, and she comes round, and it's this scary scene where Theo ends up screaming out loud, and Hugh is holding her. And Shirley comes in, and Shirley doesn't see any ghostly stuff. She's just upset about the house, and Hugh's like, hey, I can fix it. It wasn't, it was like that when we got here. It wasn't us, but I can fix it. And again, it's this idea that he wants to fix things for his kids, that again, even the fact that it's a broken house. If that's not symbolic for a broken family, it's like ever since they were kids, there's this idea of a broken home that he has not been able to fix. So he wants to literally fix this broken home. He wants to try and fix his kids and help them. Because I think, that's the other guilt. Olivia at one point says, hey, you don't have to see them again for years if you don't want to. And, that's not true. He does want to. He's scared to actually make the effort. He was scared to put himself out there, I think. But he does want to. Theo saw this. Theo saw something, just like Luke's seen something. And Stephen, of course, is in denial. But Theo is outright just seen something with her father there, and I have to imagine that gets the conversation going about certain things. And I feel that Luke is going to be on board with whatever they want to do, assuming they find him. And again, he could just be going to get high, but I wonder if there's more to it. I honestly wonder if Luke's going to the house. It's not so much that he was stealing money to get high. He was stealing money in a car so that he could get to the house. I think that's maybe what he's done. He wants to get to the house to try and figure things out, to fight ghosts, to see Nellie if she's really there, whatever. But I think he's on the way to the house. But yeah, so no, solid episode. I mean, this episode has the tough job of following up 5 and 6. 5 and 6 were both very good, and this was not as good as those two, but it was very solid. It probably didn't have as good scares, because the only big scare that it really had, I mean, outside of maybe Olivia being on top of him when he woke up, was the ending, and it's okay. It's an okay horror scene. It's not a type of horror scene that completely makes me tense or anything like that. It's just kind of an effective, popcorn horror scene. But I think it's notable because Theo sees something. Theo has now witnessed something ghostly in our adult life, and I think that will be relevant going forward. I will say the standout scene for me in this episode, though, might actually. I mean, Luke's speech at the funeral is very good, but I actually think the monologue from Mr. Dudley is probably my favourite scene. I think him doing that, and it stays in the one shot the entire time, like I said. And as he gets to the baby stuff, the sad piano theme that we've had all season kind of starts to kick in very slowly, but over the top of the sort of more sinister, sort of suspenseful thing that's happening in the music. And it was a really well done, 3-4 minute sequence of him just telling this story. And this show's done this a few times where it'll just let someone tell a story, and it'll be imagining the story that adds to the horror, because you're having to let your mind fill in the blanks, at least for now, until we see more. I don't think we'll see any of this specifically, though. I think we'll see more of what happened to the Crane family in the house, but not what happened to the Dudleys. But no, really, really good. So, not super excited. Got 3 episodes left. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv, and you can support us over there for as little as $1 per month, and we love you loads if you go over and have a look and see what's there. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. Always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?